now we know which side's your good side since you went up first, right?
We were trying to figure out which side of our face was the best to help pick the chairs.
We're gonna vote in Slido later too. For me, was that the goal? Like this side or this side? No one seemed to know. So why don't we start with introductions?
Yeah, let's do it.
How about you?
Okay, so thank you for the lovely introduction. So yeah, I'm Hannah Chaplin, and about 4.5 years ago, I started a company called Receptive out of a little town. Well, it's a big city actually, but people don't know where it is. Called Sheffield, over in the UK. So over the 4 years, we built the company up. I've got to talk at loads of different conferences. I was at SaaS North last year. And yeah, we're going to get into the story of what happened with Receptive and how we were acquired by this man here.
Well, not me personally.
Who are you?
There was quite a few of us involved, which I think is an important thing to talk about too. It's not, it can't be a one-man kind of thing when you're going through an acquisition, or one woman for that matter. So a little bit of my background. I'm Eric Boduch. I'm one of the 4 co-founders of Pendo. My background's in a mix of biz dev, marketing, and a heavy background on the product side. Pendo builds a product cloud, so we help people build software their customers love. We got a great kudos. We did have a financing round a little while ago that officially put us over the unicorn mark, which is kind of cool, I guess. And with that, let's talk a little bit about acquisitions. So Pendo bought Receptive in April of this last year. Yep. So it hasn't been too long yet. Still kind of in that early honeymoon period, right?
Really?
I don't know. I think so. I hope so.
It's not felt like a honeymoon, has it?
I don't know exactly how to read into that. You mean it's like the ongoing joy of marriage? Is that what you're saying?
So I don't know about that either, Eric. But no, it's been a lot of hard work, hasn't it? So we were very ambitious with our integration plan. So it was after, where are we now? So November last year, after I talked here, we were actually already in discussion with Raoul, one of the co-founders. We did a random, cold LinkedIn email, and I thought he just wanted to pick my brains about product feedback, which is what Receptive did. So I was really off with him at first. Did he tell you this?
Yes.
I was a bit cold with him. And I'm not normally like that, but we'd had another big company fishing around, so I was a bit like, what's going on here? So I met Raoul and kind of got talking to him. And then things happened pretty quick from there. So the reason I say it wasn't a honeymoon period is that since the acquisition, we've all been working really hard to make the integration a success. So lesson number 1 is it's a lot of hard work, isn't it?
It is a lot of hard work. So give us a little background, tell us a little bit more about what Receptive did and how big Receptive was prior to the acquisition.
So I think the first thing to say is we weren't for sale, which is, I don't know if that's weird. Is that weird? Do people look for acquisitions generally? I think some people do. So we were doing well. The business was very successful. We were hiring. We had 10 full-time employees, which is quite small, but for things I'd done before, that was a decent size. And we started the company because we constantly had a big problem with how you manage product feedback, not only from customers, but internally, and with sales as well. So we formed Receptive, and then very quickly started getting some traction, started closing some bigger accounts, which I think one of the reasons we got attention from Raoul at Pendo.
So now going back to this, you get this cold email from Raoul, right?
Yeah.
Raoul's one of our other co-founders, leads biz dev for us.
Yeah.
So you get a cold email from Raoul. What made you interested in the acquisition? How did that turn from, cold Hannah response to cold email to, yes, let's do this?
That's a good question. So it was just the more I talked to Raoul, I think the first time I was a bit like, who do you, what do you want? Which isn't like me, is it? I'm not normally like that, but I must have been having a bad day or something. But we had an initial conversation, and there was just a few things he said. I was like, oh, okay. And then we had another conversation. As we got into things, I started thinking, oh my gosh, this could be going somewhere, which was really weird. Because like I say, we weren't actively looking for an acquisition. The company was going well. And so it was a bit of a shock in a nice way.
So what specifically got you over that hump? What got you from the point of to this is something I want to do?
I think, it was talking to Raoul and understanding, because obviously when you start companies, you look for opportunities. And a big part of it for me was we started talking. Receptive did this really amazing job at gathering and understanding product feedback. And one thing I'd always wanted to do is then start tying feedback and how the decisions you've made about what to build next then tie in with like usage data. So even that little use case on its own was very interesting to me. Started talking to Raoul about it, started talking about like the bigger picture of product stuff. And I was like, oh my goodness, this could take Receptive as a product to like a whole nother level. And it would have taken me years to get it there with the team that I had and the investment that we had. And it was just the way the products fitted together, really, on top of I got on well with Raoul. And then we met Todd, who's the Pendo CEO, Dan, who's my co-founder. We went down to London to meet Todd. But even then we were like grumbling about it a bit because we were just so focused on, having a day at the office to go to London to meet this random person. But it was quite a natural process over a couple of months of just those conversations.
And all of us from the States, or for that matter, Canada, probably think like Sheffield's like, 20 minutes for London, so.
It's 2 hours on the train, just for the record. Everyone who lives in London doesn't know that Sheffield exists, but I do. It's all right, you've not been yet. Lots and lots of people from Pendo have been, but we'll have to get you over next.
Absolutely. So it's interesting too, because at the same time this is going on, we're going through this process, and I don't know if you knew that like the thought process of buying in the feedback space didn't start with Receptive.
I was gonna, tell me, I don't know too much about
So it's like brand new information now, breaking news.
What happened, Eric? Tell me what happened.
So it actually started because of another company that we had been talking with and through for ages, and it was very interested in becoming part of, the Pendo cloud, the Pendo team, part of the company. And as we were going through that process, the thought process occurred to us that like, we should probably talk to more than one. We should see what else is out there, which is, write that one down. It's important not to just look at one people in a market space or one company in a market space or one person when we're interviewing for jobs, same kind of philosophy. Yeah. So we actually went out and we did this, pretty extensive market scope, trying to figure out who would fit in, who would work best. And there's pluses and minuses from an acquirer standpoint to the size of a company. One thing I think that's important to understand if you're ever going through the process is that sometimes revenue is not necessarily a great thing. And for us, as we're looking at, we're valued a lot and continue to be today based upon our growth. And some of the companies we were talking with had more revenue than Receptive did, but at the same time we're growing slower. So we're looking at that as potentially a negative because all of a sudden it would impact our growth numbers, right? If their revenue numbers were high enough, it would actually impact our growth numbers, not as an absolute dollar figure, but as a percentage. Because we're growing 2x year over year, which is extremely important to keep that up. And we're all built around this fast growth kind of enterprise. So growing up and acquiring a company that maybe had more significant revenues but was growing slower then had different challenges associated with it. So we're going through a lot of that process of, okay, what makes the most sense for us? And then, being product people, it inevitably turned into like, who do we think has the best technology, right? So our process ended up being like, okay, who's gonna fit culturally? Who has a great product team? How are they gonna fit with us? We thought we had a pretty good go-to-market engine already in place. So it was a matter of, okay, what can we add to the product cloud that will help us drive this forward, expand our offering, make our customers happier. So that was kind of the process that's going on in the back end as we're going through this. And then we're selling the deal to the board because Pendo, as was mentioned, we've now raised over 200 million. At the time, it was a little over 100 million. And so we have some significant financial investors that have a vested interest in what we do with their equity and their cash. So it's very important that we can sell this, right? We have to build the business case of why this is good for Pendo. So we're going through that process in parallel. So it's just something to keep in mind as if you're ever being acquired or acquiring, is kind of try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand what they have to go through to justify the acquisition from either perspective. So, talk to me about the process of due diligence, right? We get into it, we're interested in buying the company, and this whole due diligence process starts. Yeah. What was different than what you expected in a due diligence process? And maybe touch on what the painful parts were.
So it kind of divided into two bits, the due diligence. And all the way through this, I don't think we'd quite made our mind up that we were going to sell yet. So it was very much from your point of view, you were checking us out, right, in the technology and whether we could work together. And we were kind of like doing the same thing. So one side of it, honestly, for me, like, I've only ever worked for myself. I had a job for a couple of years when I left school when I was 18, and then all I've known is starting companies. So I had to like give that, so I was like, can I work with Eric? That's the question. Obviously, we're sat here today, so, but that is a process that you have to go through. I think if you start things, going into like a bigger organisation, you've got to make sure that you can like get on well with everyone. So there was like that side of it, and I'm sure you felt the same, or did you not?
Yeah,
that's
felt
part
the same.
Of it, right?
Yep.
Good. And then the second part was the legals. Oh my goodness. So if we had to divide it into good, bad, and ugly. Good was getting to know everybody, and I think we all clicked really well. It felt certainly our side. We clicked with the team, everyone that we're involved with at Pendo. Just the way that they were going about the due diligence said a lot to me about how they act as a company. And Pendo really is one of those organisations that they have some really strong core values, and you actually live up to them, which is, a lot of people say those things and don't deliver on that. And I felt like Pendo were very much who they said they were, and we all worked really well together through this, what is a very, very difficult process of the due diligence. So I'd say that was the good part, this realisation, like, one, this is very exciting, two, it's a great opportunity, and three, these are really good people that we can work with. The bad and the ugly for me was the legals, oh my goodness. So, lawyers. Oh my word. So someone who's quite, I'm quite up for risk and risky things. I ride mountain bikes, I start businesses. Like, risk has never been a problem. You will feel the same, having also founded companies and what have you. Lawyers' world, completely different, isn't it?
It is completely different, generally.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I remember like being on phone calls and being like, Dan, make it stop. We've had an hour of this lawyer being like, this might happen, and then this might happen, then this other thing might happen, and then something bad might happen. And honestly, I'm not joking. That was like what the conversations went like, and you're on the phone for a whole hour, and you're like, I want to do some work, and this is important, but like, I'm very comfortable with these things. So,
yeah,
what have you experienced this? What was it like for you?
I mean, it's always that way with legal, and I think their job in a lot of cases is to show you the edge cases that might screw you over, right? And they're very good. They're like the pessimists, right? Pointing out different things that this could go wrong, and then this will happen, and then that might cause this to happen, and that would be really bad. So
and then
you get a lot of that.
House away.
And so, I mean, like, one thing I advise anyone going through this process, in general, anyone doing startups, going through fundraising, going through acquisitions, hire good lawyers.
Yeah.
There's like nothing worse than bad lawyers. And sometimes a bad lawyer isn't necessarily someone who doesn't understand the law, but doesn't understand the context, right? They're there in large part to make sure that you're treated fairly and to keep you out of jail. Is the way I look at it. You're not doing anything illegal. They're making sure you aren't doing something that's going to put you in a bad position. But they often don't understand the business context for getting things done. And we're risk takers, so we understand there's some risk. I mean, it's inherent in a startup that there is risk. So you just have to be able to put the advice you get from legal in context, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be hard. And if you get really good lawyers that maybe have worked in the business world or have done a lot of work with startups, they can kind of separate out the big and the little issues for you, so you understand, what's likely to happen, where your real risks are, and what's really unlikely to happen, but could still be, a bad outcome.
Yeah.
So I would spend the money on good lawyers. It's worth it in the long run.
But even like spend the money on lawyers like from day one, because there's little things that you don't think much about, such as having a good employment contract in place. Like when we were a scrappy startup, spending a few £1,000s or dollars, what are we doing today? Dollars, pounds? Spending money on like an employment contract. Felt like a stretch, when you're a few weeks into this startup and you've not got much money. But then when it comes to an event like raising money or an acquisition or an exit, little things like that, like having good paperwork in place with your employees, seems so small, but that just makes the due diligence go a lot smoother. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
Definitely worth every penny. And if you're not frustrated and crying every day about the call, I wasn't actually crying, but if you're not frustrated with lawyers, then I'd argue they're not doing their job. They are. That's exactly what they're for. Our team were incredible, frustrating but incredible.
Yeah, and there's things you can wait on, you know, in some cases. Like, I mean, for Pendo, I think we put employment contracts in place as we were going through our first round of funding, right? So there's things that don't necessarily need to be done up front. So there's a balance, I think, when you're starting up a company about what you spend on legal and what you don't, and kind of get the bare essentials done, but make sure you do them right. In the acquisition case, I would say make sure everything's done right. You know, I's dotted, T's crossed.
Customer
Especially in our case, I mean, we're
contracts.
acquiring a company in another country.
Yeah.
Which is our second one
fun.
in another country. We we jump out and forget just buying a company down the road. Let's buy one halfway across the world.
Yeah, and that's a good point actually. I think to us during the due diligence, I felt like I had to really advocate for Sheffield. How much of an issue was the Sheffield thing?
I don't think it was a big issue for us because I think we thought, you know, we're already basing our Europe operations in London. That was already underway. You know, getting up to Sheffield's not bad. I think, you know, and some of it too is when you're excited about the company, for better or worse, you start selling it to yourself. We're like, oh, the engineering talent in Sheffield is amazing. It's better than it is in London, and you know, it's easier to hire there. There's less competition. So we're coming up with all these reasons Sheffield was good. Some of which was true. Most of which was true. Some of which was probably us like being really excited about you and Dan and being like, we want these guys on board. So we were kind of making things work a little bit too. So there's a mix, right?
The hiring bit was true though, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean,
there we go. I didn't tell you nonsense.
Everything's been great. I think one thing to think about too, whether you're an acquirer or an acquiree, the pace of acquisition. Yeah. You know, when we talk about failed acquisitions, it's usually because of pace. Like for all those salespeople that are out there, how many people out here are in sales? So about a third that are slowly raising their hands. It's like asking this question in London. It's like people don't want to raise their hand. They don't want to admit it.
Sales.
But there's a saying that I always heard in sales that time's a killer of deals, and time's also a killer of acquisitions, because more things can go wrong the longer it goes through. So, you know, run a tight process, but run it quickly. It makes the acquiree feel better about the process, like they feel wanted, they feel loved, they feel like they're going to be integrated, and it just make sure that no hiccups come on your side either. So run a tight process, make sure you do all your due diligence, don't skimp on that, but run a quick process. Yeah,
definitely. And as, what am I, the acquiree? I'm getting my words wrong now. The acquiree. That pace was like, it was brilliant, but it was also quite difficult because it could go wrong still. And I remember Raoul, who I was in contact with at Pendo side, who was kind of running things. His advice to me was like, yes, focus on the due diligence, but keep your company going as normal. And like, I get that was like brilliant advice, but it was very, very difficult, like practically. So the only way we were able to really do that is like, luckily I could trust the team, but I did have to pretty much like leave the team to the running, because Dan and I, Dan, my co-founder, we were just on the phone to lawyers all day, and you know, there's all sorts of little things you need, isn't there? It's a very in-depth process, so make sure you've enabled your team to like run the day-to-day, so you're still giving customers a good service. And because if the acquisition falls through, you go back to your business, right? So you've got to keep it going.
I mean, it's something you need to remember. Like, things can happen. Things that are outside of your control. Markets can change.
Yeah.
You know, the acquirer could be acquired. There's lots of things that can happen. I've seen that happen.
Really?
And one of the good experiences too, though, I think one of the good things about doing this is all of the founders at Pendo had both acquired companies and been acquired before.
You could tell.
So you can kind of, we understood like the pain that you see and the pain that we feel in justifying and going through it. So I think that made it easier. So now the acquisition is done. Talk to me about what might be the most important part, the process of integration. What went as expected? What was good? What was bad? What was ugly?
Right, okay, where do we start? So I think for this acquisition, it was very much about acquiring the team and the product, and Receptive becoming part of the Pendo product cloud. So it's now called Pendo Feedback, and it's fully integrated. Now, not all acquisitions are like that, right? Some acquisitions are, you know, you'll get rid of the whole team, you'll throw the product out, but this was very much a case of within 4 months, we had to get the teams working together, we had to integrate the products, and we had to relaunch. So it was a very busy summer, wasn't it? I think the things that went really well, and like Eric touched on it there, is like that you could tell there was a really good level of experience at the Pendo side. And I think I don't know where this came from, Eric, you might be able to tell me, but one thing that really worked brilliantly was like, there was me, Dan and Rebecca at our side, and then there was a couple of people, mainly Shannon and Raoul, that were like owning the integration project. It wasn't a case of, let's integrate this company and off you go. It was very managed, wasn't it? Was that a conscious decision at Pendo
Yeah, definitely
side?
a conscious decision. We want to get integrated at all the department levels. We want to get sales working with sales and engineering working with engineering and the finance teams working together. And I think it's one of the most important things is I think when you're acquiring a company, a lot of people underestimate the time commitment for executives, right? Because you just don't want to acquire, I mean, we're in software, we're paying multiples, right? We're paying for the people, we're paying for the IP, we're paying for stuff we want to stay around. It's not like we're buying, a huge amount of like hard assets. Like we're not buying inventory. So what's important is that the people get integrated in the culture, the people are excited about what you do, the people feel part of the team. So I can't emphasize enough that during the integration process, spend a lot of time with the team and not necessarily just, hey, you go out to their office once and you say hi to people and you shake their hands, but have them come to you, get them integrated in your sales kickoffs, get them integrated in your product meetings, have people flying, in our case, flying across the pond to get involved in product meetings or sales meetings or executive meetings and really get that integration happening right away. And then also make sure you're not leaving them on an island, spend time there. Make sure you're spending time in their offices.
But you could really tell it was honestly, like it surprised me how quick we felt like Pendo. Like it was odd. It was like literally the day after it was done, it was like someone had flicked a switch. And I think that was the build up to it and how people at both sides interacted with each other throughout the due diligence made that feel very comfortable. But I think having a strong management team in place and executive buy-in at the acquirer side is what made it work. So I've seen acquisitions before where it's like, there you go, off you go, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the ones that are tough when you just say, oh, we bought this company, we're going to leave them alone, which sounds good. And I think you give them, leaving them alone makes it sound like you're empowering them, but you're really not. You're just kind of putting them out on an island and hoping they can figure it out. What you do want to give them is, you do want to empower them, but you want to empower them as part of the overall entity. You don't want it like that old, was it Pink Floyd song, Us and Them?
Yes,
you want an integrated company. You don't want an us and them. You don't want to be like, oh, here's Pendo and Receptive.
Yeah.
Pretty early, it was Pendo and Pendo, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It was like, hey, here's Pendo feedback, and here's Pendo
It
core, and
even
here's
feels a bit
Pendo
weird,
this.
this conversation, saying Receptive again feels a bit odd to me.
I know, I almost forgot the name already.
Like, what was it? There was a company I worked for, I can't remember. So that worked really well. Definitely advise strongly, get leadership behind both teams and get them working together really well. I think the bad and the ugly was I think it's just a change thing, regardless of how brilliant we were working together and how good a fit the products and the teams were. I think every individual at some point, Receptive side, had a little breakdown, not in and it was really difficult. There was just a lot of change happening around us. There was a big deliverable that was a few weeks away, and that was really, I guess. Did it feel very different for you? I think we all, in our own way, had a little panic or a little loss of confidence because there was so much change happening around us.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to manage for people is change. That's why you kind of try to go out of your way to make them feel at home, part of the company, part of a bigger whole, part of the culture, and do that right away.
Did it feel weird for you though, this new company, these new people suddenly, I know it didn't suddenly appear, but was it an adjustment at your side?
It's interesting you say that. I would say no, and it didn't feel weird for us because at the same time, we're adding so many new hires. We're growing and hiring people so quickly. The weirdest time for me, as far as that change was, at one point we went from 14 to 30 people in, I think, 30 days or 40 days. So it was you more than double your company size in a little over a calendar month. That was weird because all of a sudden, you have more new people than you have existing people.
Yeah.
That was the weirdest
Yeah.
one. And I imagine if you're doing a really big acquisition where like you're acquiring someone that's as big as you would have those issues.
Yeah, it'd be crazy.
I haven't been through one of those yet where it's like, hey, we're 1,500 people buying another 1,500 person company. But I imagine that would be a lot tougher from that standpoint. But I mean, I walk in the office today and there's people I don't know. It happens a good bit, oddly, or badly, or sadly. I don't know which one. One of those leaves. So we had a question, you know, what was the size of Receptive at the acquisition time, number of people, clients?
So there was about 100 clients and 10 full-time employees at the time of the acquisition.
And then, now, did you tell employees about the potential deal during due diligence? That's always a good question. It's like, who do you pull in and when do you pull them in?
Do you know what? That is really difficult because we're a little team and we had like 3 offices. And it was really weird. Me and Dan would like sneak off together and like not be seen for half a day or whatever. And Ali, who was like our first employee, she knew something was going on. So I think quite soon into the discussion with Raoul, so this was like October, November time last year, I had to tell Ali, she's just too smart. She just knew. But it's really, really difficult because it's a massive, massive distraction, and it was bad enough in a way, not bad in a negative sense, I guess, but I felt like me and Dan were like massively distracted with this thing that may or may not happen, and it's like, do you distract the rest of the team? It's like, no. So we tried to keep it on the down low, but it was really tough. And I think after we'd met with Todd in December, the CEO, when we met with the CEO of Pendo in December, and things started to get more serious, we're like, right, we're going to have to tell people now, otherwise it's just weird. What about you?
So one of our core values is transparency, and there's always this like, oh, what does that mean? You know,
how tension though, right?
Yeah, you know, how much is transparent? Like we believe like transparency means we're going to share the board decks, we're going to share our revenues, we're going to share all our financials. Transparency for us doesn't mean we're going to share like employee salaries, because we feel like we don't own that data, right? That's their data. If they want to share that with people, great. They can tell their friends what they're making, what options they get. And it's similar in kind of an acquisition, is that like we want to be transparent with people. Well, we want to be transparent with people in a way that's non-distracting, right? So early on, when you're just thinking like, oh, we might look at someone in this space. Well, we look at people all the time in different spaces. So it's not like, you know, you want to be like, oh, by the way, we might be doing this, because while that is transparent, it's also distracting and probably something that's not going to happen. I mean, there would be so many false, you know, negatives if we did that. So we usually talk about it when it becomes likely that we're going to do a deal of some kind. So we started saying, like, we're talking with a couple companies in the feedback space that we're interested in. You might be pulled into these conversations. Just remember, you know, this applies to our core value of transparency, that we're giving you this information. We also have a core value of freedom and responsibility. Make sure you take into account the responsibility part. All this information is confidential. You shouldn't be talking to others outside of Pendo about it. You should only, this shouldn't be a distraction from your job, because, you know, 90% of these things don't happen that we, you know, are really early. So we do talk with people about it, but we talk with people in very couch terms about it. And we pull them in when there's something that at least has, you know, at least a 25% chance maybe of happening, right?
Yeah, I think if you're like in my shoes in that situation where your company might be acquired, I think the reason we chose not to share it, while we were also very transparent, we chose not to share it until we knew things were a bit more serious. Because when you think about an acquisition, most people think, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job.
People worry about that.
I'm going to lose my job now. And like the last thing, like we're a very close team, the last thing you want to do is give people that worry unnecessarily. So until we knew things a bit more, then we shared it very similar.
Yeah, and then the same thing when you're acquiring companies. They're like, well, they have a marketing team. How are they going to fit? Does that mean that like I'm going to have a new boss, or you know, how does that affect me? So there's all those questions that come out. So I think you don't want to pull people in unnecessarily too early and cause them consternation. But I do think it's, you know, we're a big fan of transparency. I think it's important to be transparent when, you know, transparent period, and give people the information when it's appropriate, when it's likely, you know, to turn into something. So we did share that information well before we closed the deal with Receptive. that we were really excited about this company in Sheffield, and everyone's like, "Where's Sheffield?"
Sheffield, what's that? Yeah, exactly.
Is that in New York? No. I think at least half the people knew where Sheffield were.
Is that in London? No.
Is that? It's like that's near Shoreditch, right, in London.
Sheffield, Shoreditch, yeah.
So let's see. We covered a couple. And Slido's up if people. We're weaving some of these questions in.
I think this top one.
You like the top one?
Yeah, let's do that one.
I was going to go into like. Let's before we grab the top one. So it's been 7 months since the acquisition, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think about how it's gone?
It's terrible. No, not at all. No, it's honestly like zero regrets. Like no regrets at all. It's been amazing. It's been brilliant. Very, very exciting. Lots and lots of work on both sides. I can't stress that enough. Go in with your eyes open that you are not going to sleep for a while, and that is okay. But yeah, it's been brilliant. It's been better than I could have imagined. Like really, really good decision. And hopefully you feel the same. Is this the point? You're like, nah, it's awful.
No, it's funny you say that because a question just popped up that Pendo, are there deals you wish you didn't do? Right as you said that, which is kind of funny. This is definitely not a deal we wish we didn't do. We're really happy with how things have worked. The team has been great to work with, and I think culturally, it was a good fit.
It just
worked. I think
it just worked, didn't
people
it?
often underestimate the importance of a cultural fit, right?
Yeah.
Because, these are people that, they're not just the software product. You got to work with them day in and day out. You got to want to work with them. You got to gel.
Yeah.
There has to be chemistry, so to speak.
And I think the fact that was easy and we didn't have to think about it or try at it, I think was a good sign because it just worked, didn't it? We all seemed to get on very well, and that was a massive tick for both sides. I can't imagine going into an acquisition and feeling like there were things you disagreed with in the way the company was run or like culturally that would be hard to do, wouldn't it? Definitely.
I forgot to start this off by saying toodle pip, It just occurred to me.
Are you Googling British phrases now?
I did that before we got on. I was like we actually ran as part of like the integration. One of the things we did was we had Southern slang, which we put out on our Facebook page and other places and asked people in England, right, what the different terms meant.
I was just confused the whole time.
We did the same thing the other way around, things like toodle pip, which I would have never remembered. There's lots of good ways. So there's cool things you guys can do too for the integration to make people, fun things that marketing or the people group can do to make the whole process interesting. And slang is always one of those interesting ones. Like we were talking about leather pants, which have a very different meaning in the United States and Canada versus England. Things like that are always kind of funny. So the question we were getting to, that was the top question, is what's one thing you would change if you were to do the deal again? Question for both of us.
Yeah, I like that one because it did make me think of one thing I'd changed during the actual implementation and integrations. I did find it really hard, being like, we're a small team, there's like nearly 400 on like the other side. And it was very, very difficult. There's literally me, Dan, and Rebecca, so 3 people, and we were trying to integrate and do everything. So Dan was mainly focused on the engineering because it was quite an integration task. So he was looking after the engineers, doing like technical integration, getting to know the engineers over in Raleigh, which basically left. And Ali, who was employee number 3, went on maternity leave the day we announced, which was amazing and really, really exciting. So it was our first receptive baby, which was awesome. Or second, actually, because Dan a little. Anyway, that was really exciting and brilliant, but it left me and Rebecca trying to do everything. Hayley went off into the sales team very quickly, and I think if I had to change one thing, it'd be that like core team was like left alone for a bit longer. I felt like Hayley went into sales, and really, I think we could have done with more of that small group just doing whatever needed to be done. Through at least through the integration phase.
Yeah, so I'm gonna change this up a little bit and say like, what do you think Pendo should have changed to do things differently? Instead of me answering that, I'll let you answer that. Like, what could we have done better?
What could you have done better?
Or differently, even if it wouldn't have been better.
I think I honestly, out of all, what could you personally have done better, Eric? No, honestly, looking back, I thought about this a lot for this, and that was the one thing I would advocate for. Like, if we do an acquisition again, leave the team just doing whatever needs to be done. Don't worry about trying to put them in a department or a job role until the initial integration's done. That's the only thing I would actually change, because like you said earlier, you could tell there was a lot of experience within Pendo at doing acquisitions, and that really showed. Same for you then. What would you do differently, and what could have we done like better or differently?
Oh, we have so many questions to get to, and we only have 5.5 minutes left.
No, Eric.
I'm trying to avoid this one here. You know.
Don't be worming out of this.
You know, I think one of the things I would like to do is like, you know, you talked about the most painful process, the legal process. Like, how can we make that better? How can we put in place like, you know, here's a set of key terms. Let's talk you through these things. This is why we're doing this. These are things you should think of as important. I don't know how to do that better, to be honest, but I feel like it should be better. Like, I feel like we should make you have to spend less time with lawyers than you did, right? I think that's something we can do better. And I don't know that I have the solution yet, but I think it's something to think about next time is like, how can we make the legal process easier?
I don't know if it's just necessary, if it's just painful because it's legal stuff. Because like the people running it at your side, like Jennifer Kane, the CFO, is an incredible woman. Like, I remember doing the due diligence with her, and me and Dan were like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait till we're on the same team as this lady, because she is like formidable, isn't she? Jennifer's she's awesome. Wow. And so, yeah, we couldn't wait to be on her side. But she was incredible all the way through, as was Raoul. So yeah, I don't know. There's always improvements to be made there. I honestly don't know how much of that was just it's legal stuff, and you've got to go through it.
I feel like though there's something we can do better, and that would help both sides.
More cake.
More cake.
Just feed us cake.
We're pretty good with feeding people things, unfortunately for me, you know, because I feel like there's a saying like there's the college 20. I think there's the Pendo 22. People say you get there and there's like food always at the office, and
the snack
wall
is dangerous. The wall of snacks is dangerous.
I don't know if that's people say it's a perk, but I'm not so sure it's a perk.
That's what sealed the deal for me.
You know?
I walked into the office and saw M&Ms. I was like, sign me up.
Yeah.
That's what did it.
That's good to know. For me, I'm starting to think a wall of snacks is not a perk. The gym membership perk, wall of snacks, not a perk.
Okay.
Every M&M is like another 5 minutes on the Peloton, you know? So we have some more questions. Did anyone churn from your team during or right after the acquisition? Did anyone see the acquisition as not a good thing for the company?
Short answer, no.
Yeah?
No, everyone was really excited. Like I say, through the summer, I think we've all had a wobble, but it was just part of the change process. We've all had a little freak out.
Yeah, I would say, and too, even looking at, you know, outside of Pendo, when I've been through other acquisitions, I think, you know, if especially key people are seeing it as not a good thing for the company, then it's probably going to affect the acquisition and whether it goes well. So if there's a key person in particular that it feels like this isn't a good thing, it would make me question doing that acquisition to begin with, because you want people on board because you're building something together. At least in most of the acquisitions I've done. I've never done one that was like a hostile acquisition, or we're like buying assets, or, you know, buying a small group and laying one off, you know, laying say like a huge group of people off. I've never been involved in those types of acquisitions. So it's, you know, I think it might be different if you have like, if you're doing something that is like, there's an underlying asset that has value and you're paying for it, but you're then, you know, quote unquote, trimming the fat or whatever the hell that means. But I've never been involved in something like that. Don't really want to be. So I like the acquisitions where it's like kumbaya, you know, like everything's great. We're building something together. Yes, everyone's on the same page, because those, I mean, the fun things are like getting a new group of people involved and getting them all pumped up, and you're like, yes, we can crush the world. We can build this great thing. We can dent the universe. We're going to take over this market. Those are great stories when you're like doing an acquisition where like, well, we like you guys, but that, we don't want that. We're going to get rid of that. Those are ones that don't seem like they'd be very fun. We covered what the size of Receptive was at acquisition time, number of people, clients, so that second question, I think we're good. What about sales and customer success after the acquisition? Was this positive and easiest or hardest?
What happened with them?
Yeah,
like
what happened with them?
Or?
I think, both, like, were you still able to sell, and then also the team and how it was integrated?
Actually, that reminds me, one thing we did, which was really smart decision, was we paused selling, didn't we? After the acquisition, until we relaunched with the integrated product, we paused sales, which was that was a really smart idea, because the sales that would have happened in the months that we were paused for while we got everything together, they came in like September anyway. So that was amazing. So we didn't see an impact on sales other than up, which was incredible, and what the idea was, right? At least that's what I thought we were doing. Customer success-wise, we've been doing a lot of handover and things, but again, we modelled out what we thought the predicted churn would be, and it's actually been half of what we predicted. So there was no major churn fallout. Sales were really healthy the first quarter, but you've got that. This stuff doesn't just happen. This is the result of a lot of very hard work by a lot of people.
They took the questions off. I think that was
Does
a
that
hint
mean
that we couldn't go over. We have 20 seconds left. So quick summary. I mean, if I gave advice out there, having been through acquisitions that didn't happen, that could have, like there's one I could have made a lot of money on that, we had an offer on the table and then macroeconomics things changed, read like .com crash. If you're thinking about getting acquired, I would often think about eating when served. I had an old board member that said that, and there's also like the Wall Street saying like bears make money, bulls make money, pigs get slaughtered or something.
I don't know what you're talking
there's
about.
There's a bunch of sayings like this. I would say that, don't get greedy out there. Sometimes being part of a bigger whole is good. I had a friend who sold a company for just a little bit of a premium, then the company he got bought by they got bought by someone else, and then went public in a period of like 2 years. So he ended up making like 30x his original like acquisition offer just because of this really fortunate turn of events in his case. Think about that. Spend a lot of time. The integration of the companies is the important thing if you're working in the software and the tech space. It's really important you get the companies working together. So plan on spending a good amount of time, and then plan on spending 50% more time. Make sure you get acquisitions done quickly from both sides of things. Try to make legal as easy as possible, and I think we could probably do a better job of that.
We'll work on that,
We'll definitely work on that. And and more than anything else, like do deals that make sense.
Yes.
That from both a technology and a people perspective.
Yep.
And with that, I know we're like now 20 seconds over time.
You have
one final thing to say?
That was it. If you're excited about it, the technology and the people make sense, then do it. Like no regrets, honestly. Go for it. You'll have loads of fun.
I remember one of the questions. Yes, Pendo is still doing more acquisitions. We're always looking at deals. Thank you. This is super fun.
This is brilliant.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks very much.